Hi dear friends. Well, I was at the beach the other day with my family, and my little granddaughter was just gathering up all these pretty little oyster shells. And I thought to myself, I know, I've got something I could do with those. So I thought a little bit of decoupage would be good. And I'm going to use napkins to put images on the inside here. But as you can see, the inside of these oyster shells are all really different colors, and your napkins are very, very thin and transparent. So the first thing I'm going to do is to prepare the inside with either, you could use something like a gouache or an acrylic paint, or a gesso, or just one of these little household tester pots of paint, or a craft paint of some sort. So I'm going to be painting these white, and then I'm going to carry on. And I think today I'm going to just use my gesso because it's easier. And I have a nice big brush which I'm going to use. Obviously I've washed the shells first. I've got a nice big brush which I'm going to use just to coat the inside, and I don't mind if it's a little bit irregular, and I don't mind if a little bit of the background color shows through, as long as I'm masking most of the irregular color, just to be able to make my napkin design fit on and show up properly. So I'm just going to do the inside of the shell. And it's pretty easy to do this. You'll be able to do quite a lot. These make lovely little trinket holders for your dressing table. You could put earrings and things into them. They could be a nice little guest soap dish. If you are having a party of some sort, they're quite nice to be able to put either a little treat in for your guests, or if you've got nuts that you want to serve, tiny little sweet containers. Lovely things for parties as well. So the gesso dries nice and quickly. Now, do I paint that or don't I? Yeah, I think I'm going to paint it, just to make it a little bit even with the inside of this. You can always change your mind later, and you can always go back and do it a different color. Alright, so I'm leaving those little textured bits as they are, and I'm just going to continue painting all of these before we do the next step. So this little shell has got quite a soft, delicate color, and I quite like the yellows, and I think that will suit well with one of the things that I'm going to be decoupaging on. This one just had a slightly brownish mark, pretty similar to this. So all I'm doing is just putting a very, very rough, irregular coat of paint on there, just to sort of blend that into the background a little bit more. And I'm going to do exactly the same here. Do this coat very thin. Just as you can see, it's just pushing the dark colors into the background. And that one, I quite like the coloring on the end of the shell, so I'm going to leave that. And this one's also just got a little bit of shell sticking forward. There we go. So that's pretty easy. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll show you the pictures that I'm going to be using. Right, so we're on to the next stage. I have a selection of napkins here, and I'm going to be using these as images to go onto my shells. Mostly feathers, birds and butterflies, but I have got one with some leaves. And if you live in the UK, you can order single napkins from the Napkin shop, which is a decoupage supply shop. I think when I bought them last year, they were 33p each, which is pretty good. So if you're wanting to just take a screenshot of the supplier, it's a nice way to be able to get a variety of different designs. So I'm going to be needing to do this project now. I'm going to be needing my napkin. And as you know, napkins are made up of several different layers. Oh, I haven't got the same picture as this now. So let me show you with this napkin. You've either got 2 or 3 layers of paper, mostly 3, sometimes 2. So that's one. And then if I just use my nail just to rub this down, you'll see here that there is another layer. So we don't want these 2 back layers, but do keep them because they are useful for other things. We just want this top layer, which is pretty transparent, and that is easiest to work with for our project. The next thing we're going to need is some podge, or Mod Podge as you know it, and a very soft bristled paintbrush. So I've just got here a little horsehair paintbrush, and one tip when you're working with podge, because it is sticky, is just to make sure that you wet your brush and dry it first. and that makes it a little bit easier for the cleanup process. Now I'm going to fiddle around with my napkin image here to see how best I'm going to fit my design on, because I'd like to put this little robin on, and I can see that I can fit him on there. So I'm just going to use my fingernail, not using water at this stage. I know people often do use water, but I'm just going to gently pull around this. The water will come a little bit later, just to loosen what I don't need away from my main image. Because your napkin is so thin, when you come to put your Mod Podge on, you don't need to put it underneath, and I'll show you what we're going to do. I'm just pulling off all the bits I don't need, just using my thumb to hold the napkin in place. Right, get that off your work surface so you don't get all messy and tangled up. There we go. So now that I have this positioned, I'll just reorientate it if necessary, and I'm simply going to hold it with my thumb, my thumb like that, and I'm going to paint the Mod Podge over the top. And because your paper is so thin, it's going to go right through to the bottom and seal it onto the actual little shell underneath. Try not to touch it, and if it starts to wrinkle, leave it. So I'm going to brush the podge on up to the edge where I have painted and leave the rest just sort of floating in the air, because once the Mod Podge has dried, I will use a little bit of water just to take that off. And you can see that this is applying really easily. Working from the center outwards is normally the best way to go. There we go. And just spread your podge as evenly as you possibly can. If you had small enough shells, you would be able to also perhaps drill a hole into the one side and make a set of earrings or a pendant for a necklace. That could also be rather a fun project to do. I just don't have the same equipment here yet that I had back home, so I can't demonstrate that to you today. Right, don't overwork it. Check that it's all sealed down to the edge and leave that to dry, because step 2 will come when we remove that extra bit of paper. So I'm going to set that aside, and then my next one that I'm wanting to do is to do a feather on this little shell. Now I have this little dish, very naively painted guinea fowl feather from South Africa, and I thought it'd be quite nice to have another little feather. So this tiny little one might work, but I think I fancy that one. So I'm going to just tear it off using my thumb to hold the paper and support it, and just work my way around the edge here, giving it a bit more than just a thin margin. And the soft torn edges blend really beautifully onto a background, so you don't have any hard edges at all. Alright, I'm going to set that aside, and I'm just going to separate this top layer from the others so that I've got that very thin image. And this one is also 3-ply napkin, so you can see here those are the 2 layers I've torn off. You could have separated them first, I mean it wouldn't really matter. Now you need to work out which way you'd like to lie your feather, and I think for me I'm going to do it like that. So again, holding it so that it's secure in the middle, I'm going to work on one side and then the other. Be quite generous with your Mod Podge so that it actually goes right through your napkin. And you can see why I've left this yellowish background color here, because it blends in so nicely with the tone of the feathers. Don't know why I had my podge on that side, working across my body. Right, so this is really, really quick to do once you've actually got your shells washed and prepped. Okay, make sure that this napkin is in contact with the shell all the way around. You don't want any little air bubbles underneath. And again, I'm going to leave that little piece there until later, and then I'll remove that. Alright, so I'm going to do similar things with my other designs. The one is, oopsie, the one is this lovely guinea fowl feather, so I'm going to do one of the big feathers there. I'm going to take out this little yellow bird and pop him onto that shell. I'm going to do this little butterfly on there. And then, oopsie, I dropped this napkin. I'm going to do these leaves on here. So I'm going to be filming now without actually talking so that you can actually see what's happening. So I thought I'd show you what I've done with this one because I did struggle to get it on because of its shape. I've just taken off the old image and I have wet it with just some water, and now I'm going to just loosely press this just so that it kind of, for want of a better description, grips the napkin. And then I'm just going to, where it's wanting to pucker and fold here, use my fingers pretty much like you do in dressmaking and just make a little slit just so that the paper can ease over. It's not glued down at this stage. I will still need my Mod Podge, but it's just helping me just to get it to lay flat so I can do the next step. Right, so I'm going to now take my Mod Podge and work from the center outwards along the narrow edge, and just making sure I'm applying this generously so it penetrates right through the layer of the napkin onto the shell below. But I think more because of the shape of this, it was difficult to get this larger piece of napkin on. I was determined to do it, but if I had taken a smaller image like a butterfly, I don't think I would have struggled as much. But it's good to learn from one's mistakes, and it's good to learn from things that challenge you. So this end bit I'm just not going to glue down. I'm just going to leave. Now this going into the tiny little bit in the middle here is quite delicate. So I'm just, just going to try and roll it on with my brush, rather than brush it, because I seem to be pulling up more than doing anything else. So although the podge is really generous, I can smooth it down once the napkin lies flat. That's a bit better. It has torn in one spot, but you know what, it's not the end of the world. And next time I won't be as ambitious with such a large piece. But I was really wanting just to see if I could get it to work. One thing when you work with napkins is because the colors are so gentle that if you do have a little tear of some sort, you can always go in with a colored pencil just to touch that up. But with this design, I don't think you'll notice it. So I'm going to leave these to dry completely. These are all my ones that I've done. And then I will show you what to do with the little bits that stick out and how we're going to finish these off. See you in a minute or two or three. Well, I'm back, and I've given all of these shells time to dry naturally, because that's the best way to work with podge. It does tend to sometimes wrinkle a little bit simply because of its acrylic nature. So what I'm wanting to do now is to actually remove all this excess napkin. So I've got a sanding block here. You could use a nail file, and I'm just literally going to work almost at a 90-degree angle just to wear through the paper at this stage. And you can see it is starting to break up the surface here. It really does give it a nice finish as well. And you can just use, if you've got any little tiny bits that are stubborn, you can just break that off with your finger, but then just go over with your sanding block, because any fluffy edges like that you'll just smooth out. Okay, so we're going to get rid of all of those fluffy edges, and round this side as well. I was if you do quite a few of these at the same time, if you were, say, making gifts, then it's the sort of thing that you could come to finish these off while you're watching a movie on TV. Right, so I've gone all the way around. Oh, there's another little bit there. I just want to get that off. What I love about using the sanding block is it follows the contours of your design so well, where it's really tricky to do this with a pair of scissors. So for this one, I just feel it needs a little bit of a darker color around the edge just to define it. And I've got this lovely little stubby brush, which is one of my favorite things for doing edging. And I have this, oh, let me put the lid on again, otherwise I'm going to squirt this all over myself. I've got the Pebeo Studio Acrylic, which is a very similar color. So I think I'm just going to do a very thin line of this green around the edge, just to kind of define it a little bit more. It's a bit like when you have a picture framed. Oh, that's not the right color, is it? Okay, I'm just going to mix up a color quickly. I think I'll just take a little bit of this green and put a bit more blue in it, because that ain't going to work for me. So I won't need an awful lot. Let me just find the right blue. I think I want to, well, even a Payne's grey might work. Oh my goodness, got it all over me and not into the container. It was smart. Right, just want to get some white paper and just see whether I'm heading in the right direction. Yeah, that's better. Right, so I'm just going to take this green that I've mixed with the Payne's grey, and you'll see that it's a little bit more in keeping with the colours that are in the napkin. And I'm just using my brush flat and picking up these very, very thin little edges here, just to give them a little tiny bit of colour. And what you'll see is it'll just draw your eye inward. So I'm not trying to brush anything per se, I'm just following the contours of this thin edge. Okay, going all the way this way. And then I'm just going to rotate the shell so that I can do the other side, like that. Do this little bit here. Not all of the designs will need this, so I feel with the little birds and things like that, the shell is quite small, the design is quite delicate, as is the feathers and the butterflies, so they kind of hold their own. But for this one, because the shell is bigger and there's not as much color on the design, it's very gentle. You'll just see that this, when I've completed it, will frame it together nicely. I'm not going to do too much in the corner here. I don't want that to be too heavy. I'm just going to whiz across this little edge. Brilliant. And a little bit in there. Maybe a slightly thicker coating on this edge. There we go. Right, so you can already see now that it pulls your eye inwards. So I'm going to set that aside. I will leave that to varnish a little bit later on. But for now, we are going to use a very nice varnish that I got when I was in South Africa. But you will be able to find something similar here. And that is a clear decoupage varnish. This one is a hard varnish. And the most important thing to know when you are working with varnishes is don't shake them. This one dries matte, so it will give it quite a nice finish. And it actually spreads really evenly. It was made up by the factory. I knew the owner really well, and I said to him, we need a varnish that is really substantial for when you're doing things like placemats and coasters. Something that if you put your hot coffee cup on, it wouldn't leave a nice ring in the surface of the decoupaged item. And this is what they made, and it really was lovely. But there are locally in the States and Britain, and I'm sure in Europe, some lovely, lovely varnishes that you could use. So apply this evenly, try not to let it pool anywhere. Oopsie. And then just leave that to dry naturally. It will lift the color, which is lovely. And if you are putting on things like little earrings which have got sharp points and stuff as a little container, you will find that this will stop the napkin from becoming damaged, so it's not going to affect your image. So varnish just to the edge like that. Let's do a bigger one here so it's easier for you to see. I used to love collecting guinea fowl feathers at home and then taking them and painting them in watercolors. They were such fun to do. I know we get pheasants here in the UK, but I don't think you get guinea fowl. I could be wrong. I'm still learning about the bird life and the trees, and the trees are just magnificent here. They all have flowers on them, which we don't get a lot of at home. Our flowers tend to be tiny little green wispy things. So, and the birds, love the birds. I heard a cuckoo the other day at work for the first time, and that was just sheer joy. Alright, so I think that this will probably only need to have one coat each. I love the shape of this little shell. It's really come out like a mini little bowl almost. And I know what's going to happen. I'm seeing my granddaughter next weekend, and she's going to say, oh, she needs all of these things because she's a great gatherer. And she loves crafts, and she loves nature, so I'm sure she'll be having some of these to take home. Anyway, that's fun. We can always go to the beach another day and fetch some more. Right, so varnishing them all, bar the one that I've just painted. I'll do that a little bit later. And then I'm just going to leave this to dry, and I'll show you a picture of what that looks like when it is dry.